Hello everyone and very warm welcome to you. My name is Kirsi Ylänne. I am an accessibility specialist at the Celia Library here in Finland. Celia is a national center for accessible literature and publishing in Finland, funded by the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture, and we are proud to be members of the DAISY Consortium. I am your guest host for today's webinar, Do More with Word2EPUB. Okay, let's get started. In the previous webinar titled Create EPUB Publications from Word with a simple tool anyone can use, we learned about why DAISY developed Word2EPUB, how to download and install, and there were some quick demonstrations on producing EPUB titles. If you missed it, then the video, transcript, and slide deck are available on the website. This session will demonstrate the very latest version of the software, introduce you to the newest features, and give a taste of what is coming soon. Okay, I'm going to get us started and hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you so much, Kirsi. Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Orme, and I work at the DAISY Consortium.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Polizotto. I'm the Alternative Media Supervisor at UC Berkeley.
Okay, so what are we going to cover in today's webinar? We'll do a quick refresh about the Word2EPUB tool and provide a summary of the supported EPUB features that you have with an EPUB generated by the tool. We'll spend most of the time updating you on what's new in the tool since it was released earlier in the year. And we'll also give you a bit of a flavor about what's coming soon. And as Kirsi mentioned, there will be some time for Q&A. But we have a lot of slides to get through. We'll be showing you lots and lots of screenshots. So feel free to put your questions into the Q&A and we'll answer as many of them as we go through using the Q&A feature. And then we'll provide the text interactions to you as part of the resources. Okay. So a quick refresh then. So Word2EPUB is a piece of software that is free for you to download and use. Currently, it's available on Windows only, but the EPUBs you create with Word2EPUB will work on any platform in any reading app. You start with an accessible structured Word document, and with this you can create a beautiful EPUB. The tool is designed so that it's really simple to use if that's how you want to use it. So it has a simple mode, which I'll show you in just a moment, but also an advanced mode, which gives you many options of creating even more featureful EPUBs and for you to have finer control on, for example, the visual presentations. The tool's been localized into many languages, including Finnish. Thank you, Kirsi. And you can get the tool by downloading it from daisy.org/word2EPUB. So let's take a look at how you can use the tool. You can use it actually in several different ways, but here we'll see an example of using it from the Word ribbon. So I'm looking at a screenshot of myself within a Word document within Microsoft Word. And Word2EPUB works in a range of different versions of Word, and we test it going back to Word version 2010, I think it is, on Windows 7 upwards. And on the ribbon, I've got a little icon there that says Word2EPUB. So once I've saved my document, I can click on that and it starts a very simple little dialog. Here it is providing me a suggested file name and a location for where the EPUB will be saved. I can do some different things at this point, such as change the destination folder and change my preferences, get help and so on. But I'm just going to click on the OK button. It goes ahead, creates the EPUB for me. And when it's being converted, I then have the opportunity to view the EPUB, to open the folder in the default reading app, to open the folder where the EPUB has been created, or just to finish the dialog there and then. So 1, 2, 3 clicks and you have an accessible EPUB, assuming you've started with a good Word document. And that EPUB, as I mentioned, you could load that onto a tablet or a smartphone. You could take it and put it on a Mac. In this case, what I've done is I've loaded it into the Bookshelf app from VitalSource. I can use this for reading both commercial EPUBs, but also EPUBs I've made myself. And here it is sitting in my collection of books, and I could click on this, read it, and then I've got all the advantages of EPUB, such as being able to do the visual adjustments, have the great navigation features, the read aloud, and so on. Lots of different features of EPUB are supported by the tool. Great navigation, super semantics, so that someone, for example, with a screen reader knows when they're entering and exiting from lists. There are support for block quotes and asides and so on. As you would expect from something from the DAISY Consortium, we pay a lot of attention to building accessibility features in. So we have support for images and the appropriate markup of decorative images, great markup of tables, and we are able to include math as well as MathML. And there are some features that make it a pleasant tool for you to use and helpful for readers with maybe other needs. So, for example, you can add a helpful cover image, you can adjust the style sheets, you can enter great metadata, and as you'll see in today's session, you've got the opportunity now to export your publication as a clean and accessible HTML document. So that is the quick recap of the tool Word2EPUB. It is being used by university alt format departments all around the world. Joseph, you're here today as one of those. Tell us a little bit about how you are using Word2EPUB at UC Berkeley.
Yes, so we create EPUBs for students who need a more accessible document than, say, a Microsoft Word document or a PDF. As many of you know, the EPUB specification allows for lots of rich semantic markup, such as marking block quotes, asides, many of the page numbers. And so when we need to create a more accessible document, we use the Word2EPUB tool to create the EPUB. And as Richard mentioned, all of these features that are in the Word2EPUB tool create a very rich, accessible experience for students. And while there are other tools out there that can create EPUBs, there's nothing quite like Word2EPUB in terms of how it can output accessible EPUB documents. And also, it's very flexible for our needs. So we at UC Berkeley use a custom style sheet that we've created that has the type of fonts and colors that help us to look at our documents and make sure that the EPUBs are created according to our standard. And we also can apply our UC Berkeley logo to the cover image of all of our EPUBs. So we have taken some unique approaches to how to implement the Word2EPUB tool here at UC Berkeley.
Thank you, Joseph, for telling us how you use it where you are. Look forward to your comments as we go through the webinar, adding some of those experiences to when we're showing people some of the new features. On a previous webinar, we were joined by Nancy, who works for a specialist service creating accessible school textbooks across Canada. So that's another kind of use case for it at a younger education level. It is used by non-profit organizations that are creating accessible books in regions of the world such as Latin America, in Africa, and in Southeast Asia. Government and other public bodies are using it to make accessible versions of reports and other publications that they're producing, and self-publishing authors are using it to create their own ebooks available for distribution from their websites or for sending on into other ebook distribution places. So here are some examples of people using the tool. So as I mentioned, we're going to spend quite a lot of time in updating you on what's new. We're going to cover the new style sheet that's been added, some of the language detection. We're going to talk about some of the new options for page numbering, a critical feature that people value very highly in EPUBs. the optional metadata summary page, and then some workflow steps that if you're working in a department that maybe is either using the tool or considering using the tool, this part of the webinar might be especially useful to you to learn how you can do some post-production tweaks using the Sigil tool and use the quality assurance wizard that's now built into the tool, making it all really a kind of one-stop solution to be able to go right from a word processor to a finished file. Then we'll do a final stop looking at how we can generate clean HTML with this tool as well. So let's start this whistle stop tour then, just to mention that the new default style sheet has been introduced into the latest release, which is 1.05, released this month. This was because we have previously been using, we provided a range of different CSS files in the tool, and advanced users such as the folk at UC Berkeley and at PRCVI, for example, they've gone and tweaked the style sheets. But the experience out of the box, some people felt that the visual presentation of the EPUBs they got could be better. So we've done some work on that, supported by users in particular in France, for example, to improve that experience. But if you're using the tool at the moment, and even if you upgrade, it will continue to use your last or your default style sheet. So in order to switch over, you would need to, after you started the tool, click on the button that is for advanced mode. And then in the tab of the advanced settings that are opened up for you, you would move to EPUB options, and you would make the change so that the CSS file is set to default.css. If you want to make this change in a way that you don't need to make this alteration every time you generate an EPUB, then you would go to the preferences where you would set it up as your default preference. So what's in this new default CSS? Well, there is the, it's set so that justification is an option in your EPUB reader. Previously, it looks like basically you didn't get the chance to choose between justified or what I call at least right ragged, left justified text. Now it's a setting that's open to you in your EPUB reader, and some people prefer to have right justification or fully justified text. Previously as well, if you had reference numbers for maybe an endnote, these were the same size as the other text, but the convention, at least in print, is that this is superscript. And so that's been added into the style sheet. And on the screenshot I'm showing here, where there are a number of reference numbers, we see that they appear as superscript. They're in blue and underlined to indicate that these are a link that take you to the endnote. There's improved paragraph spacing, and the heading formatting is improved as well. So out of the box for a new installation, you would have this default CSS, but you'd need to go and switch over to it if you're already using the tool. Okay. Next item is the faster and more reliable language detection. Within your Word document, it's possible for you to set the language that's being used, and they refer to it as the proofing language. And in many countries, in many educational materials, you will have content in a publication that might switch between languages. So maybe English with a quotation that's in Spanish, or here we have a document that's in French and there is some Spanish language in there too. This is a screenshot of this document being edited in Word, and we see the currently selected language being shown on the status bar at the bottom there. This is French France, where the cursor is on that text, and as I move to the Spanish text, it switches over to Spanish. And Word to EPUB uses the markup in the Word document, in the XML, in order to introduce that markup in the generated EPUB and indeed in the HTML as well. So if the languages are set incorrectly, then they'll appear incorrectly in Word, in the EPUB that's generated, of course. So we can see this in action Here
C'est
the
ce
read
que je
aloud
ne
in thorium
comprendrai
is
jamais.
reading this document to
Elle
me
est
in
retournée à
French.
cet homme. Monsieur Laruelle revint à la table où il se versa un verre d'eau minérale de Tehuacan qu'il
And now
but.
when it reaches the
Il dit,
Spanish text,
Salud y pesetas. Y tiempo para gastarlas, replicó a pensivement son ami.
Monsieur Laruelle observa.
okay, so what you need to do in this case, you don't have to do anything specifically with Word to EPUB tool. You just need to make sure you've got the correct languages set in your Word document. It should be obvious to you because it'll give you spelling errors if you've got the wrong language set. And then the Word to EPUB tool will, with better algorithms now, give you more reliable language detection, so you get the a better experience with read aloud or with a screen reader.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, Richard, that for those of your users who are not blind or visually impaired and who would like a very rich experience of using read aloud for multilingual books or books with multiple languages in it, the EPUB format is really the way to go because of just this feature that Richard was highlighting, because you have the ability to mark up the languages using the proper tags for different languages, and so the student will end up hearing the proper pronunciation of words when you get to that other language content. And that's a definitely an advance for many of the users of assistive technology who are not blind or visually impaired and who don't use a program that can do that.
Thank you, Joseph. So one of the things that people are excited about with EPUB is the page navigation. That may sound kind of basic and obvious, but in fact, if you're in a PDF or in a Word document and you say that you want to go to page 50, it will take you to the 50th page in the document, not necessarily page 50 of your print publication. So with Word to EPUB and with EPUB, you're able to align the page numbering with the original print document. So if the professor says turn to page 500, you'll go to exactly page 500 as it was in the print document. Or if you want to cite a piece of text, make a reference and refer to what page that was, then you know that you're getting that right. Now, often that page breakup is kind of shown invisibly within the EPUB, but one of the requests is that people like to see the page number in the open. So it's actually part of the text of the EPUB. We see this actually in some of the textbooks that are submitted by publishers to the publisher's face-off, and sometimes it's kind of nice. I think it has to be done a little bit with care. So a couple of things on page markup. Golly, so many of these different places that are creating accessible documents have their own techniques for indicating where page breaks happen and what the page number is. And so based on the requests we've had and the sample documents we provided, there are lots of different ways to detect where those page breaks are in order to mark them in the EPUB. So it can be from the Word document, from the headers and footers in the Word document. It could be styled as heading level 6, which I think is the technique, Joseph, you use at UC Berkeley. Some folk use page number daisy, which is a style that they create themselves. So that's using a technique that goes back some years. So great for documents that are people who have produced before. And in some places, they actually mark the page number using the text print page and then the number itself. And the tool will use all of these different markup techniques in order to identify where the page breaks happen and what the page number is. And then you have the option of, however you've actually included the page numbers, of how you then represent these in the EPUB. And one option is that you can include visible page numbers, and you can insert some text if you want to. So it's not just the number, but there's some text that precedes the number and indeed follows it. So you could have the text, as I've got in this screenshot, that says print page number and a space. So at every page break, it would say print page number 1, print page number 2, for example. Another option you can experiment with is adding some styling. So here I've added some HTML styling, which puts a border with some curved edges, and I've colored it green, and then I've included the word page. And I put that in a span so that when that is then created in the EPUB, I have quite a pleasant looking page break where it says page 8, and then it's got a green kind of circle or border around it too. You'd need to use a feature like this with some care, depending on how you're actually getting the page numbers and whether that they occur, for example, in the middle of a paragraph or so on. But here there are some more options that allow you to be creative with the EPUBs that you're producing for your learners, because some people might quite like to see where those page breaks are if they're a visual reader, or they might like to hear them if they're using text-to-speech or a screen reader. Word2EPUB includes the ability to edit the metadata. So the metadata is where you can include information such as the title, the subtitle, the creator, the publisher, ISBN, and so on about an EPUB title. And that's, of course, good practice for if you're going to include these publications in a catalog or repository. It'll mean that you've then got the ability to do searching and so on. But one request we had was that to make all this information about the title more discoverable within the title itself, within the reading system itself, actually. So there is this optional ability now to include a metadata summary page at the end of the EPUB. This can be enabled in the advanced settings on the metadata tab. There's a checkbox there, which is add metadata page at the end of the EPUB. And this provides an extra file there, which is information about this digital version. It's got some structure to it, so it has headings for the title, creator, the description, and so on. And it basically makes it easy to see what metadata has been provided. So here we see the publisher is the University of Warwick. There's an ISBN number, a date, the rights. Also tells us what languages actually are included in this. And I see from this, interestingly, that Polish is included. And so something's gone wrong. It's actually taken the Word has automatically seen the name of the lead author, which is a Polish name, and it's detected that as a Polish word. So actually there's a nice little kind of extra feature there that I can check which languages have been detected and put that right in my Word document. And it includes the accessibility summary too, which you're able to edit. So not useful for everyone, but useful for some to include this discoverable metadata within the EPUB itself. Okay, next we're going to move to a couple of workflow steps. Again, as I said, these would be maybe useful if you have a department that's creating these, or if you're wanting to customize and further enhance the EPUBs. So you're using Word2EPUB maybe to do the heavy lifting, but you want to then do some additional work within it. Our goal really is to enable people just to use the tool, but some people say that they like to tweak the EPUB with an EPUB editing tool, and one of the most popular ones is one called Sigil. It's free to download and use. So now, as part of the workflow, you're able to go from within Word, create your EPUB using that ribbon toolbar button that we showed earlier, and we can turn on this option to suggest Sigil after conversion. So we do this by going into the Word2EPUB preferences. On the user interface options, we check the box that says suggest Sigil after conversion. So once the conversion has happened, we get an extra button which says edit EPUB with Sigil, or you can close out the dialog or move to the next step at this stage. But if you click on that, it will open the EPUB that's just been generated in Sigil for you to be able to go and edit it. Maybe you're going to edit some other metadata or something like that. Okay, so maybe a useful workflow step. Another one then is this new quality assurance wizard. So you can generate your EPUB, but within the preferences, again in user interface options, there's a checkbox there, which is the quality assurance wizard. So if you check that box, once you've generated your EPUB, you then have this option to start the quality assurance wizard or just to end the process there. If you choose Start Quality Assurance Wizard, it then gives you 4 steps with an helpful explanatory text that what you might want to do at that particular step. So here we are at step 1, which is to validate the file with EPUB Checker. And it tells you about EPUB Checker. It tells you what will happen when you launch the tool and what to do if errors are reported. Now, you may not have EPUB Checker on your computer, in which case, if you click this box, it will then discover that you don't have it and it will help you download it and install it. And then if we click on Launch EPUB Checker, it will run it for me. And in this case, it runs the checker and the screen turns green and it tells me no errors or warnings are detected. The EPUB is valid. So that's the first step in this QA check wizard. The next step, when I click on Next, is to launch ACE. And again, as this is step 2 of this, it gives me an explanation about ACE by Daisy being a free tool. It tells me what to do if there are some issues. And again, just like EPUB Checker, if I don't have it on my computer, it will help me download it and install it. Clicking on Launch ACE will launch the ACE tool, and it will give me a summary of what ACE has found, and I can go and have a look specifically at the violations. I can also check that the metadata has gone in there, and I can view outlines and so on. Actually, on the EPUB I've generated here, it's telling me that I have a moderate issue in terms of best practice. So if I were to click on the Outlines tab, I can see that what's happening here is that there was a missing heading H2. And of course, what I don't want to do is try and fix that in the EPUB. I want to fix it in the Word document and then go through the process again. But we might find that ACE finds another error, in which case we would follow the appropriate instructions. ACE by Daisy, of course, has a knowledge base in there as well, which we're able to dig deeper if we want to. But hopefully we find that we have no issues at all with this ACE check. So we could move to the next stage in the Quality Assurance Wizard. And the next stage is to launch your EPUB in a reading app. And this is important because, of course, it's impossible to perform a complete evaluation using fully automated tools. We need to do some manual inspection, and we might want to try it out with some assistive technology as well. So in this step, this will help you launch the EPUB you've just created using the Thorium Reader app. And then it gives you a suggestion of some things that you might want to check out within the app itself. So does the table of contents look right? Can you navigate it around it? As you move around the publication, is the experience smooth? To check out the page navigation, how the images are looking, math expressions, and so on. So clicking on that Launch Thorium Reader would load the Thorium app. And we've seen a couple of screenshots of that already. So we would move to the next stage, which is to open the folder. So you might need to do that if you want to go and run another tool, or to take the EPUB you've created and copy it onto another drive or a USB stick or something like that. So those are the Quality Assurance Wizard steps. You can go backwards and forwards through those. And if you're producing EPUB in a production environment and you want to support maybe some of the folk that's doing that with clear direction of steps to take, I hope you might find that this QA wizard is a helpful aid in doing that. As I mentioned, you need to switch on the QA wizard if you want it to appear as part of the workflow steps. Well, lastly, in this little tour of what's new, let's show you the new process, which is you can generate HTML with Word to EPUB. How do we do that? Well, it's back to that familiar place, which is the Word to EPUB preferences dialog. And in here, in user interface options, there's the checkbox, which is to offer other output formats. And we would check that on in order for this to be there for us as well. And what this does is in the advanced pane that opens up, if you click on advanced mode, in addition to the tabs for metadata, cover image, EPUB options, page numbers, math, and the headings report, a new tab appears, which is other outputs. Currently, there's only one other output offered in addition to EPUB, and this is for HTML. And the text reads that if your document is short, you may want to create an HTML version. Joseph, I think this is something that you produce at UC Berkeley. Do you want to give us a couple of examples, maybe where and why you might produce HTML rather than EPUB?
Sure. So at UC Berkeley, many of the files that we're converting for our students are not entire books, but are articles, journal articles that professors have posted to their online course. And so they're relatively short. And in situations like that, HTML is a nice option as well for students. While EPUB is a great format and it has all of the accessibility features that we've been talking about, EPUB is based upon HTML. So providing students with an HTML version of a journal article or of a segment of a book will provide students with the same types of accessibility, the rich accessibility experience that they've encountered in EPUB. So with these shorter documents that we're converting, we often will convert them to HTML. And we like the option of converting to HTML for some of our students who are more familiar with just navigating web pages and haven't yet made the transition to reading EPUBs in an EPUB reading system. Since reading standalone HTML files is very easy. You don't need any particular app to be able to read them. You can just open up the HTML file directly in your preferred web browser. And if you're a screen reader user, you can go right to the same kinds of places on the page and use the same keyboard shortcuts when navigating a web page.
So Joseph, I guess what you don't have is in your EPUB reader, you have your neat kind of table of contents to be able, as part of your app, to be able to go to a specific bit. But I guess that's relevant if you're dealing with a part of a publication. And you don't have the page navigation either. That's currently not implemented, and we haven't thought about how that would be done right now within the HTML export, but I think we can probably be creative with that. And you don't quite have the same level of controls over visual adjustments, because an EPUB reader will give you the opportunity to do things like change the font, change the spacing, change the colors, change the margins. A browser doesn't typically offer you those kind of features. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yeah. So they're not identical formats in terms of all of the features that they provide, but in the underlying semantic level, the ability to display math content properly, and the ability to have students for students to hear different languages pronounced correctly, those are there. So some of the semantic content that we've been talking about that is available in EPUB is indeed available in just standalone HTML files. But yeah, depending upon the needs of the student, and I'm thinking specifically for our students who are blind or visually impaired, HTML sometimes is an option that works better for them. So it's just about finding the needs, learning what the needs are.
Horses for courses is a phrase that would use at least. So as you mentioned, this can be read in any browser, and there is a save as HTML within Word and a save as refined HTML, and it works, but it's what I would say is the HTML from this tool is clean HTML. It's not cluttered, and it's also got lots more semantic support. So we've got the language markup, as you mentioned, support for some of the features that are supported by Word2EPUB, such as citations, block quotes, endnotes, and so on. It'll do some image conversions and so on. And we've got the advantage of math support too. So if there is math in your publication, that is written out as MathML. And so if we were in this case, the screenshot is of me converting quite a complex Word document with lots of math in it. I've gone to that tab, the other outputs, and I've got just that one button there, which is create HTML version. And if I were to click on that, the tool runs, it gives me the information. So in this case, it tells me there were 268 Microsoft Math equations in here. I see that this has also converted some math type equations. More on that in a minute. It took 8 seconds to do this, just 20 pages or so. But one of the options here is to view HTML. So were you to click on that, it would just open that in the browser. So here we are in the browser looking at that document, and I'm using MathJax here to use the keyboard navigation of this math expression. It's reading this aloud for me, and it's doing visual highlighting as I navigate through the math expression. So depending on the tools you use, what you and your students, if you're working in a university or school setting, using, the HTML is a kind of neat additional thing that now comes with Word2EPUB. So that's a little bit of a roundup of the new features that we wanted to highlight that have been added to Word2EPUB over the last few months. The features that are being built in are those that are requested by our users, and they say are important to them. So this is a good opportunity to thank those organizations and individuals that are sending in bug reports, because there are bugs often in software which we're able to squash, and also feature requests and giving us encouragement with the tool. And that's just great to hear from them. So thanks for that. They're part of that extended team. So we're going to move next to what's coming soon, but I don't know, Kirsi, whether there are questions queued up on what we've covered so far, or whether we want to handle them now, or we'll do the coming soon section next, or if Joseph, there's anything you want to add at this stage.
Yes, Richard, there are many questions, and Joseph have been kindly answering some of them, but maybe we take some general now and then continue. And one question in the beginning was, is Word2EPUB available for the cloud version of Word 365?
The short answer to that is no. Currently is a desktop app only. I haven't seen what questions are here, but usually the first question is, when's the version for the Mac coming? And the answer to that has been not before the end of the year, but it's now December. Let's see what we're saying next year. We need to look at what the forward path is for this tool and how it integrates with other developments actually that are happening within the DAISY consortium. I hope that we'll have something during 2021 to offer to people who are using the online version of Word and indeed the Mac version of Word, but it's not something that will be coming really, really quickly. But I hope that we can provide something for those users sometime next year.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Lars: is a command line version of the converter in the plan?
It is in the plan.
Great.
Thank you, Lars, for the question.
And then there was one question about the updating, that if you use the Word plugin, will it update automatically? Yes,
you have. I think by default, it will check for updates. and you can turn that off if there's a sort of security thing, or you don't want your tool. I mean, it's rude to make your tool just go and check without asking. And also within preferences, you can force it to go and look for an update as well. But whether you're using it as a standalone tool, which we didn't show, but it's possible to run the tool from the desktop and then go and browse for the Word document you want to convert, or indeed you can select lots of Word documents and it'll convert them all in a batch process, or you can be using Windows Explorer, find a Word document, right click and convert it from the menu that pops up there too. In all of these different ways, you can, within the tool, update the tool, and it will quickly update itself, and then next time you run it, it'll be the new version.
Okay, thank you. And maybe we take questions a little bit later.
Great. Well, there's not too much to talk about in the coming soon session. Sorry, I didn't give you a chance, Joseph. Was there anything you wanted to add to any of the stuff that we've talked about so far? Or shall we proceed?
Yeah, feel free to proceed. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you for those questions. So coming soon then. Maybe I shouldn't have said coming soon. Coming in the future. I told you that we've done some work on the style sheet, but our team is now working on improving the style sheet approach, maybe taking a method that allows you to kind of add to different options, including, for example, the ability to embed a font. So right now, you're able to choose a particular style sheet that will embed the Atkinson Hyperlegible font from the, I believe they're called the Braille Institute. It's a font I really like and that's been developed for people with low vision, but other fonts exist. So APH have their font called Afont. There's Tiresias. There's also fonts that are used in other countries that maybe do better support of accented characters. Luciole, I think it is the font that's used in France. Or there could just be fonts that you prefer to use. So we're going to do some work on the section that allows you to build up the style sheet and also choose to include embodied fonts in the HTML, in the EPUB that you create. The second area that will be coming soon that we can talk about is the ability to have content in a details tag, which is expandable. And this is kind of interesting because it's one of the new recommended best practices for extended descriptions. If you were on the webinar last week, or if you viewed that, you would have seen some great examples of how extended descriptions can go beyond alt text. And of course, that's really necessary in some of the images that were being looked at last week, infographics and maps and charts and so on. One of the techniques is that you include really rich marked up content following on from an image, but that is initially held in a collapsed element. So it would just say extended description here. And by selecting that, it expands it as a kind of accordion type feature for someone who wants to have that to be able to experience the extended description. So support for expandable content in a details tag is coming too soon. And this also might be useful if you have just instructional materials with maybe questions and answers and those sorts of things. So some of the wonderful features of HTML and EPUB will be supported within the tool, which aren't naturally supported within a Word document, of course. And it's been requested many times, whilst there is support for Office math in there, so you could use the Word equation editor to build up math expressions, and this will be written out as MathML, as we saw in the HTML example there, for example. Many people are using MathType as the way of building up their math expressions. It's a more mature tool, it's got more features, and they might be using it because it's supported, for example, by Duxbury Braille Translator. Right now, those expressions are ignored by Word to EPUB, but we're working on support for math type. We're kind of pretty much more than halfway there, and so expect that maybe even in the next release we'll have support for math type built into the tool, and you just need to click your buttons to create your EPUB, and that will turn into wonderful MathML. So here are some examples of what's coming soon, but you can add to this list if you have suggestions or requests as to what is missing or what would be really helpful to you by dropping us a line at word2epub@daisy.org. And if we see a number of requests coming in for the same feature and we think it's something that we can do, we'd love to get into a conversation with you about what exactly that should look like and see if we can get that built into the tool. So that's a little roundup of what is coming soon. And I guess we can now cover any other questions that we haven't got to yet.
Thank you, Richard. I think there are a lot of questions and Joseph have been answering them, but one question come from Bill. How does Word2EPUB and the HTML output handle tables?
So it handles them as simple marked up tables. Right now, I'm not so happy with it because it assumes that the first row is a header row. And so if you're using a screen reader, that's a nice feature as long as it is a header row. So if you move to a cell, it will announce that the column header, and you can request that with your screen reader as well. It's not supporting row headers because that's not a feature that exists within Word. You can just mark the first row of a table as being something that should be repeated on every page. So as I said, right now it assumes that the first row of any table is header row. We have a feature request, which is that we actually detect whether the table is set up like that and only set the first row as a header row accordingly. The other thing to say about tables is that merge cells don't work so well, I think generally. And so it will generate a warning for the user at the end of the EPUB production if there are merged cells in tables detected, and maybe at least someone will think, oh, I've got an issue with that. These are picked up, of course, as a warning in the Word accessibility checker. Now, Joseph, I think you do some extra treatments with tables in your production side of things. That's a description of what's in the tool right now, and it's the same for whether it's EPUB and HTML, Bill.
Yeah.
But maybe there are some other things that need to be done at the production side of things, or feature requests coming from you, Joseph.
Sure. So yeah, and this speaks to Tomas, your question regarding inserting tags in an EPUB. So as Richard mentioned, there are some things like tables that can be problematic sometimes when outputting to EPUB that you'll want to clean up in your post-production step, and using Sigil is a great way to do that, especially with the quality assurance wizard that Richard was talking about. In our use case at UC Berkeley, when we try to address these issues with complex tables or sometimes fancy formatting that's not outputted to our expectations to the EPUB or the HTML document, what we do is we have a script that we use to run through the EPUB or the HTML file and replace tags that we've inserted in the Word markup in the place of like the parent column header or the row header. It replaces the script will find those tags that we've inserted in the Word document and replace them with the correct HTML markup. So the scope equals row attribute, for instance, for tables, or the proper font formatting for dashed underline or something like this. So that's the technique that we're using now for ensuring that all of the semantic content is transferred over to the Word, from the Word document to the HTML file or the EPUB document when the Word to EPUB tool currently doesn't support a particular feature. But as Richard mentioned, I would highly recommend that you make a feature request for that, for support of any feature or of any semantic markup that Word to EPUB currently is not outputting to EPUB, as these types of issues are well known, and with the added support or added requests for this kind of feature or support, I'm sure we'll get around to adding that support soon. Wouldn't you say, Richard?
Let's see how big they are. Yeah.
Okay, and then this question, is it possible to insert landmarks in the EPUB navigation on Word to EPUB?
So right now there is some code in the tool that does do some landmark side of things. I think for the start of the publication, maybe the table of contents, something like that. I think if we had some specific examples of what those could be and how that would be done within Word itself, we can go back and forth on how that might be included within the tool. So it's basic at the moment. There is just a couple, I think, but the code is there, ready to kind of accept inserting landmarks.
Okay, thank you. And Ken is asking, would the embedded fonts be specified in the CSS or in the Word document?
They're not in the Word document, and it's a kind of combination. So the CSS will need to reference the font, and at the moment it's a bit of a kludge in the tool, in that if the user is selecting the low vision CSS, then the code then adds the font files into the EPUB itself in a folder. So in the envisaged, we haven't really done the design of how this would work, but I would assume that as part of selecting a font, that would trigger some changes in the CSS so that the font is selectable, and also would then add those font files into the EPUB in the appropriate folder. If Ken wanted to help us get that feature right, it would be lovely to have your thoughts.
Okay, thank you. And David is asking, will it support video, audio, animation GIFs?
I'm going to do those in reverse order. So animation GIFs, yes. In fact, we did a really nice workshop. Well, I thought it was nice for the conference Accessing Higher Ground on creating EPUB. And we used this tool, and it included animated GIFs of the Titanic sinking, and then we did an extended description of that. So within the EPUBs on the reading tools we then looked at, we had the animation of the ship sinking with the different times and so on. Audio, we've done some experimentation with that, and we could see that could be an interesting feature. Video, we haven't even touched that yet. So I could see, if we can see the use case and we have explained how it would actually be implemented, I could see support for audio, or little descriptions and teacher notes and things being quite a nice feature. So we could consider that.
Okay, thank you. And then I think we have at least time for one more question from Bruce. Word tables, are Word table summaries converted to HTML table captions?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay,
So in Microsoft Word, there's a feature to add a summary, and whether that outputs to the caption element in HTML. I
didn't even know that feature existed. So thank you for the request. If that's an implicit request, yeah, great. Sounds interesting. I also noticed that there was a comment here from Preska Thomas. It comes up on my screen about having a problem with underlines and italics, then doing that right through the publication. It could be that's a bug. So there's kind of a bug with artifacts to do with complex. You don't need to know the details. Try the latest version of 1.0.5, because there's a bug fix of random bold in italic text that should be fixed in the in the latest version.
Okay. Thank you, Richard and Joseph. And Joseph have kindly answered many questions we didn't have time to go through here as allowed. But now I think it is our time is nearly up, and we are coming to the end of this session. So big thank you to Joseph and Richard for sharing such good information with us today. And during 2020, the DAISY Consortium has been running webinars on the topic of accessible publishing and reading. These webinars have been attended by people in 56 countries all around the world, with individuals making time to join us at all hours of the day and night, with a total of over 3,000 participant hours from the 20 webinars. And many more people have been able to access the lasting resources from the webinars, all the recordings, transcripts, and presentation slides and summary notes, which are published after every session. The previous webinars are all available on the DAISY website, so do head there to check out the back catalogue. It really is a treasure trove of resources. The DAISY webinar team are already planning sessions for 2021 and are keen to hear from you. If you would like to suggest a subject for a future webinar or volunteer as a webinar presenter, then please email the team at webinars@daisy.org. I hope you will join us soon again. In the meantime, thank you for your time. Stay safe and well, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.